Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
And I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things quizzical, number umpty billion, because we're on like episode 249 now, so we've done like dozens of these. Anyway, if you have a question
back into
for
the
us,
mailbag.
Exactly. Diving back into the mailbag. If you have a question for us, please drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com and hear my lovely voice butcher your email in whatever version I choose to do so. And we'll pick Josh's lovely brain over here. So our first question actually comes from the Discord, where somebody had a stealthy stride question for Josh and probably took things out of context, or am I misinterpreting how things fell apart?
Yeah, we were talking about this briefly before we hit record, and I just said, let's hit record so that I don't have to go through all of this twice, basically explain everything to Dan and then explain everything again. Although, a little bit of that I did help me like get the flow in my head correctly and help me figure out the point that I wanted to make. And It is not in any way my intention to call anybody out specifically.
No, of course not.
Ultimately, the way that you want to play things at your table is the way you play things at your table, and that is fine, and there is nothing wrong with that. I will not glare over my newspaper at you. I will not come to your house and like take away your books for playing wrong. I won't do any of that sort of thing.
I will not curse your dice either. So
this was all prompted by a question that somebody brought up on the Discord, that if I wake up in the morning and roll stealthy stride and get a really high result, say like 40s, a 40 50s. Or something like that.
Yeah.
Something that is reasonably considered to be a very good result. And I don't do anything over the course of the day to actually break stealthy stride. Does that 40 essentially hold all day? My feeling on that is no. While stealthy stride does not specify that it has a duration, I feel that the circumstances and the context of it matter. And that's of everything in general, not just stealthy stride. Earthdawn does not specifically have a time breakdown of scene, which is kind of how I would handle it, where if you are trying to stealth, at least at the basic level, that stealthing would only happen within that scene. If you were trying to infiltrate the cults of the horror and your thief is sneaking in to get into a good position and they roll really well, that really good result, even if they ended up not doing anything that specifically breaks stealth, would not apply that afternoon if they were in town and trying to follow somebody. The context of the scenes are different and the circumstances are different, and therefore I, as the GM, would require a different roll. Also, Stealthy Stride is a first circle talent, and the text specifically indicates what it does. Even though the talent is magical and it's got a little bit of illusion magic, it does not turn you invisible. It deepens shadows, it muffles footsteps. I would think it even maybe does a little bit of mental deflection to reduce the chance that somebody notices you. But even with, say, a result of 25 or 30 or 40, I personally, as a GM, would require the character to at least be making an effort to be sneaky. Even with a super good result, I personally would say, if you are trying to sneak, in, as I say this in air quotes, across a wide open field with no trees or rocks or, not even like tall grass, in broad daylight, Stealthy Stride can only go so far.
Yes, you're the ninja hedge from the tick.
Yeah. Again, the context matters. If, because of the circumstances, I, as the game master, as the arbiter of the world, as the descriptor of the world, need to make it clear to my player characters that in this particular circumstance, unless you can come up with a compelling reason why this particular thing won't work.
Yeah.
There was quite a bit of discussion that resulted from that. The thought being, well, if you're going to require your characters to act stealthy, then stealthy stride is better for windlings than it is for trolls, because it's easier for a windling, because they're small, to find cover. And that is a degree of simulationism that I don't personally go for. I want to go back to stuff that we talked about with the paths, especially. The choices that your player characters make about the characters they are going to be playing tell you what kind of game they want to have. If somebody is taking a thief, or somebody takes a scout and takes stealthy stride as part of their scout build, then you as the GM should be giving them opportunities to use that. And the thing that came up that really I had a hard time wrestling with in terms of the discussion there was that if you're going to say it doesn't work when circumstances change, then there's no point in it at all, and it's useless because you can just say that the circumstances change whenever you want. Oh, the guard has come around the corner, circumstances change, they see you. That's not how it works.
Fair.
In my opinion, because that is being a dick as a GM.
Yeah.
In part, saying, oh, this thing that you've got, I'm going to do things that specifically
disrupt that.
Yeah, that specifically trump that, or that specifically go against, or that short circuit or prevent you from using the stuff that you have invested in. I think anybody who has listened to this show for a while would know that I do not think very highly of that strongly antagonistic GM stance.
Yeah.
I am a firm believer that the GM should be a fan of the player characters, not to make things easy for them necessarily, but to give them opportunities to use their stuff to be awesome.
Yeah.
But this is the part of it that I never really got to in the discussion on the Discord that I do want to talk about here, because it is, I think, a fundamental aspect of the interaction between narrative and mechanics.
Agreed.
The basic cycle of how this works. So let's take the stealthy stride situation. This is set up with the description of, like, a description of the scene, and the thief character says, okay, I want to try and find a way to sneak past the guards to get to this place.
Yeah.
Great. The approach ideally is, assuming that, well, someone who is going to be using stealthy stride is going to try to be sneaky. Go ahead and roll stealthy stride. So the narrative, to kind of borrow the term from the Powered by the Apocalypse games, in order to do something, you have to do it.
Yes.
You need to describe within the narrative that your character is taking a particular action in order to trigger the mechanics to determine the success or failure or difficulty of that particular task that they are attempting.
I'm crouching. I'm using soft footfalls. I've changed my footwear. I'm using a cloak, whatever.
Personally, I wouldn't even need to go that far.
Yeah.
The initial thing is, okay, I've described the scene. You're trying to sneak into the camp. There are guards around the camp. It's evening or it's night or whatever. Well, let's take, for example, Infected.
Yeah.
The village of Honto. You've got the perimeter fence. You've got the guards at the gate. The party has decided, at least early on, that they are not going to go into the village, because if they go in, then they're trapped and they want to kind of figure out what's going on first. But the thief is like, I want to try and sneak in. So I'm going to go on the opposite side.
Where the guards are.
From where the guards are, the opposite side from the gate, and I'm going to try and go under the fence or whatever, doing it at night so it's dark, there are shadows. Taking sensible actions that indicate I'm trying to sneak into this situation. Okay, great. You roll your stealthy stride. That sets the difficulty.
For someone to notice you.
And then basically the way that I handle it at that point is I maybe roll perception or awareness tests if there are any guards nearby that they would try. If the guard fails their awareness against the difficulty set by the stealthy stride, then the narration, then the story that develops from that moment is, however we choose to describe it, you keeping to the shadows, You lift up
Soft
the
footfalls,
bottom thing, and you slip under it, and you are now inside the village. It doesn't look like anybody's noticed you.
Yes, proceed.
If the awareness test succeeds against the difficulty, then the narration and the story that unfolds from that is you were trying to be sneaky, or even like tossing it to the player, which is something that in Earthdawn necessarily isn't done a lot, but I really like if I can't think of anything specific as a complication or whatever.
Yeah.
How did this go wrong? Tell me what happened if I can't think of anything specific. The physicality of the space is not necessarily defined until it needs to be defined, unless something is like established ahead of time, like the fence around Honto that they set up. It is described in the adventure. We kind of know what we're dealing with. So if they succeed, we can talk about how they might have bypassed it. If they fail, then maybe something that was set up on it gets triggered or tripped or whatever.
Makes noise. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is a back and forth discussion, is that the narrative feeds into the mechanics and the results of the mechanics then feed into the description of the result.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of, I wanted you to be spotted and I didn't like that result, so I'm going to change the narrative. I'm going to change the circumstances so that your result failed regardless because I want X to happen. Again, I'm not intending to necessarily call anybody out.
No.
But the idea that you just change the circumstance on a whim is not playing fair with your players. I don't feel.
I think
it's a conversation. It is a collaborative effort. And I feel that if what me and a few other people in the discussion were saying, I mentioned that when you are comparing the talent to the skill, the talent has some magical stuff attached to it.
Yes.
But two characters who both have a total step of 12 in stealthy stride, whether that they are using the talent or the skill, are going to be equally stealthy.
Yeah.
The talent is not better than the skill. It's just different. An adept with the talent at rank 2 is not going to be as stealthy as somebody who has the skill at rank 8.
Yeah.
The person with the talent has a little bit of an edge, maybe because they can spend karma on it or whatever. But by the same token, the talent can be disrupted and gotten rid of by dispel magic.
Yes.
That doesn't make the talent worse than the skill. It just means that there is another way that potentially it could be messed with. And the takeaway that, therefore the talent is worthless because there are ways that it can be disrupted was, I think, completely missing the point of what I was trying to get across, which is that the context and the circumstances at any particular moment on something like that matter. And I think it's silly if you say, well, when I get up in the morning, I roll a stealthy stride so that I've got a really high result in case we come across something that requires me to be stealthy. No, I didn't ask you to make the roll. The circumstances at that time don't necessitate a roll.
Yeah.
When the circumstances of the narrative, when the context of the story requires me or suggests that I make a roll to help adjudicate the result, great. But also, if I don't think that a roll is necessary, then I'm not going to make you call for a roll. I'm just going to say you succeed. Or if I don't think it's something that's possible, sorry, I'm not going to make you roll. You know that you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I understand approaching things from an attitude of the GM being like an adversary of the players and looking for ways to screw them over or to mess with their plans or whatever. I don't play that way.
Yes. No.
Again, play the way you want at your table, but I'm just trying to have an engaging experience around the table with people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I want them to succeed. As I have said in other places, I am notoriously kind and fickle and giving as a GM.
Yeah. I have thoughts to add to all of this. One, if you're trying to be sneaky getting out of bed, and you roll your stealthy stride to get out of bed, the minute you open the door to your room, scene changes and your stealthy stride is worthless because you've now alerted somebody else that the door is now open. 1. 2, Stealthy Stride is, yes, a default talent for thieves at first circle. It is not an optional talent. It is there by build automatically to clear your point up. 3, it's a simple action, not a sustained action, just by mechanics alone. So right there, it's intended to be a quick thing you do and move on. Next up as well, I agree with Josh. I don't think that it's time anymore for the Game Master player relationship to be adversarial. The Game Master is like the director of a movie. The actors are the player characters in the scene. You're there to work on things. The director's going to throw things at you like, hey, ad-lib this, or do the line exactly the way I told you to do the line, or hit your mark over here. They're going to put constraints on you, but your job is to work within those constraints and help tell the entire story that all of you are there to tell collaboratively. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, anyway... I am not intending to call anybody out. I don't think anybody is necessarily doing anything wrong.
No.
I just felt that I was being misunderstood or misinterpreted and was having a hard time getting across what I was trying to get across in text format. Yeah. So I figured I would talk it through.
Fair.
That may or may not help, but now I've got it off my chest. Let's go on to some emails.
I also figured somebody was trying to just like poke a fight and rage quit and I want it my way and that's all I want to do.
I said, you do what you want.
Yeah, agreed. Your table. But this is not as intended. This is not as written either.
It's certainly not the way that I perceive it, and I don't think the way that it was intended, because treating Stealthy Stride as if it's some kind of invisibility power gives it way more power than a first circle talent should have.
Yeah, so I agree. Hopefully that clears everything up and everybody is... seeing through the mud as far as that one's clear. So we have our bilingual emailer, Eli, chiming in again. So Eli, pardon me. I know that English is probably not your first language, which means you know at least one more language than I know. So I'm going to do my best at interpreting your words as written. So greetings again. Love your podcast and to do it backward in time. Whatever that means. 1, your editing skills are much better these days, not speaking on the music, and much less about talking over one another. After 249 tries, we're getting good at this. We've seen constant improvement. Number 2, is the online convention still running, and why it didn't happen this year, and will it be on in 2026?
It did happen this year.
Yeah, FreedoniaCon was on. We weren't there, but it did happen.
Yeah.
How's that?
It happened. It happened as we are recording this 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, because it's always the weekend right after Valentine's Day.
It was not this year. It was actually the weekend after, because Valentine's was on a Friday.
Okay, so it was the one following that?
So it was the following it. So it ran the 21st through the 23rd on the Facet Games Discord. And the reason that we didn't do it was because that was the final weekend of Dial M for Murder. And I couldn't really commit to anything because there was a possibility that I would be called in to do a performance.
Yeah, so it was too much in flux.
But it did happen. It tends to happen at the tail end of February, so there will be one in 2026.
Yep.
I will try and maybe talk about it on the show a little bit earlier, but
fair.
It's all on the Facet Games Discord. I think announcements also get made on the Facet Facebook. I don't think there are other socials that Facet Games is on to it get announced at.
Fair.
They don't get used if there are any, but typically the third weekend in February, again, because Valentine's Day next year is going to be on a Saturday, it'll probably be the following weekend, which would be like the 20th through the 22nd. They will get decided probably towards December of 2025. We'll decide like a couple of months before like what dates we're going to do it.
Exactly. Number 3, didn't find the Urupa book, but I bought some others of the 4th edition. Good on you, Eli. The Urupa book hasn't even been written yet. So
yeah. You didn't find the Urupa book because the Urupa book is not done being written yet.
It doesn't exist.
If you're listening to old episodes, it is a book that I have been talking about for quite a while.
Yeah.
It is actually in progress. I did a really brief text exchange with Jessica, who is the primary writer on it.
Yeah.
And it's coming along nicely. We have a more formal meeting next week, and now that some things have cleared up in my schedule, I'm going to be able to devote a little bit more time to going through what she has written thus far and providing feedback and editing and developmental notes and stuff like that. So It is in process. We hope to have the writing done at some point this year. So it will be coming in the not too distant future. It is actually in development and writing right now.
Yes. So wait for further announcements. Number 4, I agree with you, what you said on the Metaplot in episode number 25, 220 episodes ago. He felt the same in Mage the Ascension, and many of my friends ignore the Metaplot there, but I wished to recommend you look on the Lazy DM book and his ideas on secrets and hidden lore. You take the big secret, break it into beats, and find the ways the PCs can find out the secrets and that it will be relevant to them as far as the Metaplot is concerned. Thoughts?
Yeah. I don't remember specifically what I said that long ago. Because that was...
Come on. You're sewer trap
200 plus episodes and like 5 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
But just generally, yeah. The purpose of Metaplot, in one sense, is to give the sense of the setting progressing through time, of there being changes, of there being things that happen. It may or may not be relevant to any individual campaign. It's up to the GM ultimately to take what is offered and use what they want and to tie it into things that their player characters are interested in order for it to matter. Otherwise, it can just be stuff that happens in the background and doesn't have a big effect on any individual campaign.
Agreed. Number 5. In episode 20, I know we're going way back in time, you spoke on the convention adventures that you have written. Did you manage to publish any of them?
No.
Number 6. Is the Legend of Earthdawn podcast continuing?
Unfortunately not. I say unfortunately, it wrapped. We wrapped up playing, we stopped playing that like a couple of years ago. And I think that while there was a bunch more stuff that got recorded beyond what was released, I think Carlton decided to stop releasing episodes where we did because it was a good storyline ender. We are certainly not playing anymore, and I would be very surprised if any new episodes get released on that. If you are interested in hearing me play a game, it's not Earthdawn, but I am currently in the cast of a game of Apocalypse Keys for the Novel Games podcast, which I'm having a lot of fun with. I really like Apocalypse Keys as a game. There are some really interesting things that it does mechanically. And I'm having a lot of fun playing a potentially sleazy character. I dropped the introductions episode in the feed as a promo for it.
Yeah.
But my character is the Fallen, which is sort of inspired by Lucifer from the TV show Lucifer.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
But is very big on the fallen divinity and lies and deception, and is a very social character, and I'm having a lot of fun with him.
Cool. Yeah.
So check that out if you want to hear me playing in a game.
Fair enough. His last statement is to finish a story on one of my friend's Swordmaster's Windling character. Once he and his friends met a Hydra, and with one lucky shot to her eye, he rolled a 46 in the attack with his blowgun, the monster just popped away. Little did he know that it was an illusion of a Hydra, and from this day forward, he calls the blowgun the Hydra Popper, and while the players know the truth, they all get a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, I think if you roll that high going against an illusion, the character would actually figure out it was an illusion. That's kind of how they work. That attack would have acted as a sensing test, and that sensing test would have been successful. And so he would have realized it would have been an illusion, but that's fine. Yes. It's a cool little story.
Fair. Yeah, I like the little story. He follows up with one following email. Wow, I can't talk today. Great for a podcast host. Greetings! Something I was thinking on. If spirits were living in the astral plane when the magic was low, why didn't the patient horrors kill all that was there on the astral plane in the meantime? And is there a limit to how long you can exist in the astral? Do you age there? So 3 questions.
I think regular name givers would probably age as normal in astral space.
Fair.
That's just me. That's like what my gut reaction is. Part of that is because I'm thinking of par length, and it being slipped away into an astral pocket, there was nothing that gave the impression that the residents of Parlength expected that they would not age and at the end of the scourge would come out.
Yeah.
There's nothing to me that indicates that regular name givers in the astral would not age as normal. To address the first part, because when the magic level is low, there isn't any astral space. So spirits would go back to wherever they originate from, or perhaps they would go dormant or something like that. But the horrors, it's pretty well established that the horrors, when the magic level is low, are not able to exist. So they wouldn't be able to destroy anything. When the magic level is low, there is no magic. Therefore, there is no effectively astral space around the earth.
Yeah.
And so there would be no place for spirits or horrors or anything like that.
Elementals, yeah.
To hang out in. They would go off to wherever it is that they go.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, because when the magic level is low, that's not something that exists.
Fair. It's a fairly decent question because it's dealing with astral space is such a high level concept. It's kind of hard to explain sometimes. So I appreciate the question, dude. I really do. Next email. So hello, H-U-L-L-O. Hello, Dan and Josh. Love the podcast and all you gents do. You're doing low coast's work. I emailed an update. I have an update and a few questions. I emailed way back in episode 124. People need to catch up. They're just way too far behind. This is old memories. We don't know what we're doing here. I wrote about my Weaponsmith horror stalker who had found out that 2 members of his group pattern were horror marked. When the group pattern came up for renewal, he did not renew his bond in fear that he might have to potentially harm or kill those 2 members of his group if things ever went awry.
Good word, I vaguely remember this question. Yeah.
I asked for your insight into this delicate matter. I appreciated your answers and the dialogue that fell from it. Now I can provide you with the conclusion.
Oh, cool.
Took you long enough. Kidding. Just kidding, dude. We tracked down one of the horrors that had caused a mark. In the grand finale, the horror was slain and the one marked character set free. However, in the process, the other horror marked character fell in the attempt. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Needless to say, my Weaponsmith horror stalker has rejoined the group pattern and will remain vigilant to ensure such a terrible situation can never happen again. Now for some questions. We've been saving them up, so there's a few of them. My horror stalker has a Call of Harrow, which is a creature analysis, but for horrors. I am not all that familiar with the stat blocks of horrors. What are the first 5 questions at the top of your list that you would ask to glean the most useful information about the horror you are facing? And since I remember creature analysis being, you get to ask the game master a stat block question.
Yeah. I mean, it would be the same type of questions that you would ask for regular creatures.
Yeah.
Physical and mystic defenses probably be pretty high.
Yep.
I have long run it that you could use creature analysis and therefore Call of Harrow to discover if there are any special maneuvers that might work against it. Crack the shell against a cave crab, or something like that.
Yeah. Clip the wing.
Yeah. So using that to see if there are any specific maneuvers that might work. Mm-hmm. Social defense is probably further down on the list because stuff that targets social defense tends to not work against horrors so well.
Yeah.
But physical and mystic defense, wound threshold.
Oh, yeah. My group always does wound threshold.
Yeah, wound threshold would be a decent one. And then physical and or mystic armor.
Yeah.
Armor ratings would be good to determine, as for magicians, to determine what types of attacks would be more effective against it.
Yep. My group always liked the level bar on a video game like Mortal Kombat, how much life they have left. So they always like to ask for the death rating.
Yeah.
Along with the wound threshold.
Death rating, wound threshold.
Defenses, armor.
I could make an argument possibly for number of actions.
Yeah.
To get a sense of potentially how many attacks it can dish out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my tops would be physical and mystic defense, physical and or mystic armor, wound threshold, maybe death rating. I don't think that that's as high a priority. And if there are any special maneuvers that could be effective against it.
Yeah. So we gave you 6 or 7.
That's my list of probably where I would look.
I don't argue. I don't quibble with any one of those at all. I threw in my 2 cents. Okay. Fighting defensive, as in defensive stance, gives a -3 to all rolls. Does this include any damage rolls my character inflicts upon their foe?
It should, probably.
Yeah. All is the encompassing term, but yeah.
There are two schools of thought on that. One of them is sort of narrative in scope, which is that it should, because if you are attacking, if you are in defensive stance, you are not going to be trying to hit as hard. And so not only will your attacks be hampered because you're protecting yourself, but you also won't be hitting as hard because you're not going all out. So from a narrative standpoint, that's kind of like the way that's supposed to work. The other school of thought is that, well, you're penalized on the attack test. If you hit, maybe you shouldn't be penalized on the damage as well, because then you're sort of being double penalized. And these days, I'm not sure that I completely buy into that. I know I've kind of said in response, in support of that thought in the past, but unless something is specifically called out as not being penalized, then I would say it should probably be.
Fair. No worries. 2 Weaponsmith related queries. Can Weaponsmith use Forge Weapon or Armor talent to improve thread weapons or thread armor?
Yes.
Okay.
To both.
Gotcha. Can they also use the 5th Circle Karma ability on a thread weapon that has been woven threads to it and has used the Forge Weapon talent on? The book says, for the Karma ability, the adept can spend a Karma point on damage tests he makes with a weapon he crafted. I guess the real debate here is about the definition of crafted. I'd be willing to wager that every Earthdawn table out there has their own interpretation of this ability. Okay.
I would say not. I would say that a random thread weapon that you pick up in the course of your adventures would not count as a weapon that the weaponsmith crafted, even if they had used Forge Weapon on it at some point. From my standpoint, a weapon that they crafted means one that they have made, one that they made themselves.
Built from scratch.
From scratch, yeah. Which, does mean that, generally speaking, weaponsmiths would be more inclined to use weapons that they have made, and that kind of leads into the whole Heartblade thing, which hasn't specifically had any rules in 4th edition come out for it. But generally, I would not allow the Karma ability to work on a thread weapon that they recovered from a care or something like that.
Fair. A Sky Raider in our group has Sprint rank 4. He's a troll with movement of 14. Does Sprint mean he can now go 18? Or 18 and then half move and attack for a half of move attack for 9? And can he combine Sprint and Great Leap into one kick-ass jump?
So there's kind of 2 parts to that question there. I'm going to address the second one first. I do this more often. I personally think that if somebody has Sprint and spends the strain to activate Sprint, their movement rate increases and therefore would increase the limit that they could use for Great Leap, because Great Leap is limited by their movement rate.
Yeah.
I need to specifically look up the wording of Sprint to answer the other question.
Fair. They are both simple actions.
Right. That's not the concern.
No, just checking.
The fact that they're both simple actions, obviously.
Yes.
That's fine. But for Sprint, adding their Sprint rank to their movement rate that round. Okay, so if they have Sprint at rank 4...
He said his troll has a movement rate of 14.
Right, so the troll has a base move of 14. If they've got Sprint at rank 4 and they use Sprint, that boosts their movement rate to 18. The movement rate is how far the character can move and take an action.
Yes.
So their move would be 18. If they wanted to do a full move, that is, use their standard action to move again, they would move 36.
Yeah, he's 18 and 18 is 36.
Right.
Yep.
So the 18 would not get halved to 9. The 14 is how far they can move and still take an action. You hopefully aren't playing it where they can only take an action if they move 7. They should be able to move the full 14 and still attack.
Yes. Okay. Clear. I don't see a reason why you couldn't combine Sprint and Great Leap.
Yeah, I don't either. Sprint would allow you basically increases your movement rate, and Great Leap is limited by your movement rate. So yeah, you could combine them to give yourself potentially more distance that you could cover.
Yeah, a la the Hulk. Go from there. He also has Battle Bellow, which, if successful, gives a -1 penalty to their tests per success scored, correct? Does that also cover the enemy's damage tests? Is there anything it does not cover?
I would say, as a counterpoint to the defensive stance question earlier, yeah, if you're going to have your defensive stance reduce the damage, then Battle Bellow or whatever should also penalize damage tests that same way.
Yeah, just to be fair on both sides. So if you do it on one, do it on both. If you don't do it on one, don't do it on both.
And so consequently, I'm of the feeling that, yeah, you should apply it.
Yeah. I am playing a Nethermancer in an online game. Shout out to Far Scholar. Any quick tips from Josh, considering he played one for a long time? What are your 3 favorite Nethermancer spells? Novice or Journeyman in there. And he loves Death's Head, Nightflyer's Cloak, and Astral Spear as an absolute go-to to start you off on this thought process.
Yeah, Nightflyer's Cloak is pretty cool. Death's Head is very cool because it allows you to use Frighten as a simple action. Astral Spear is nice once you get Enhanced Matrices, because then you can cast it without needing to weave the thread. Gad, I haven't actually played the Nethermancer in a few years.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you go back and listen to our Nethermancer spells breakdown, first through fourth, fifth circle, first, second, third, and fourth. I know we did up to fourth. We didn't do fifth. Josh mentions his favorite spells as we break down the Nethermancer spells.
Yeah.
So go listen to those episodes. Trust me. That's where you want the answers.
Nightflyer's Cloak is pretty cool. It does require you to take Command Nightflyer as a talent, which uses up one of your optional talent slots. But the ability to shapeshift into a Nightflyer, owl, bat, krillworm, something along those lines is potentially useful. I really like shapeshifting magic, personally. The other choices would be circumstantial based on what sort of game we're doing. Ashes to Ashes is not as powerful as I used to think it was, because Ashes to Ashes, I think, is supposed to default to just one target and then you add extras. It's not actually an area effect spell, but it is still really effective against undead.
Fair.
And I just kind of like it as a concept. Nothing jumps out at me right off the top of my head, but yeah, if you go back and listen to those initial Nethermancer episodes where we broke down the spells and the ones where we did those from Deeper Secrets,
yep,
you will get my thoughts on all of those, certainly all the low circle spells.
Yeah, we'll hit 5th circle, 6th circle soon.
Maybe
last
at some point.
Are there any wonky, cool, or neat rules from the 1st edition that you've incorporated into your 4th edition tables? As in your table and my table, not the charts in the book.
Nothing that immediately comes to mind, honestly. I think in a lot of cases, if I thought when we were working on 4th edition, we frequently went back to 1st to see how things originally were.
Yeah.
And where we thought appropriate, went back to it. But nothing immediately jumps out at me as something, oh, I use this at my table, but it didn't make it into the 4th edition rulebooks. But again, I only run games at conventions, and so I am a lot more loosey-goosey in those circumstances.
Trying to draw them in and keep them playing. Yes, absolutely. Last question, I swear. There are 6 of us that play Earthdawn in person. The 5-player characters are now mostly 6th circle. We have found that combat can get somewhat bogged down at times. Everyone has more tricks in the tickle trunk. That's an interesting phrase. There are more enemies, or the enemy has a lot of stuff it can do. I assume every group runs into this dilemma at some point. We've enacted a few subtle changes that have helped a bit, like treating initiative like a baseball lineup, alerting who's on deck and who's in the hole to get ready for their turn. What would you suggest to streamline things?
Hopefully, the players are familiar with what their characters can do. And if you are alerting them that they're on deck, are ready to go so that when their turn in the initiative comes up, they know what they're doing, they take their actions, they resolve it relatively quickly. Nothing will bog down a game more than somebody who is not paying attention. and then it comes up to their turn and they need to have a bunch of stuff explained to them, and then they need to figure out what they want to do, et cetera, et cetera. I know that some folks on the Discord that have more combat complex characters will frequently have a cheat sheet that shows them the different options of what their adjusted steps are based on different things that they might do.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a flowchart of common things that they would typically do. Here's my typical round. Here's my alpha strike.
Yeah.
So that they know what talents they're activating, how much strain they cost, and what steps they're going to be rolling for them, so that they have them all kind of handy there. That's the biggest part, I think, would be for the players who are generally taking more actions to just know what they want to do when their turn comes up and to have dice ready to go. Also, especially when you've gotten to that point, there are probably typical buffs and whatnot that are in play. Mm-hmm. And having a cheat sheet that has those factored in already as well can make things go a little bit more smoothly. And then as the GM, don't make things drag out longer than they have to. I think if you get to the point in a combat where it's pretty clear what the results are going to be, it's okay at the end of a round to sort of check with the group and say, hey, it looks like things are all wrapped up here. You guys are all still pretty healthy and they're down to their last few. Do we just kind of want to narrate this out?
Yeah.
Where there's not likely to be anything weird that happens. And that is, just essentially calling a fight when things aren't interesting anymore.
Yeah. Well, do you need to roll the dice for the next 45 minutes to literally finish off every single point? Or do you just want to take the next 45 minutes and do something else with that time and move the story forward?
Part of that depends on the opponents that you've got. Most intelligent folks and creatures and whatnot are probably not going to fight to the death every time. Regular name givers and stuff are likely to surrender. It is generally a pretty extreme situation if people are actually fighting to the death. Now, when you're dealing with horror constructs and stuff like that, obviously things are a little bit different, but as the GM, get a feel for it and try to set things up so that your situation isn't dragging. I remember a fight that I did in one of my home games where the intention of the fight was that the player characters would be overwhelmed and captured, led into a trap where they had friendly darkness from an enemy Nethermancer dumped on them so that they couldn't see, but the people attacking them could. And they were attacked by a bunch of Inve who had paralysis poison. I ran that fight probably about 4 rounds longer than I needed to. I think when it became clear what the situation was, I should have called it at that point rather than rolling it out until they were all unconscious.
Fair.
That just became demoralizing for them. And so that's just kind of like a feel thing.
Fair enough. It's a subtle hand and it takes a while to get used to what you can, when things should wrap up nicely, or tell the players, you're supposed to be captured at this point, so give up. Maybe the bad guys need to make a statement. You've clearly lost. On behalf of the Seekers of Truth, a sincere thanks. Everyone at our table appreciates your wisdom and knowledge. P.S. How do you pronounce Iodia?
Like that. Iodia. I that's how I pronounce it.
Yeah, me too. That's how I've always pronounced it as well. On to Chris. Hey guys, can't wait for my Kickstarter stuff to show up. Good on you, Chris. I just got mine. I was very happy. I even texted Josh, I got my stuff. So Josh was happy for me. Question from my troubadour character, Bailey Harleywood. Can I weave threads into a song? I told her I'm unsure. I was thinking if not, then she could weave threads into a songbook or grimoire. I think she wants to cast Emotion Song more effectively on a large group of people. She has been coming up with songs to circle up with her master, which I love role-playing, so I'm kind of letting her go to town on this.
No, not to a song specifically. I wouldn't allow that. So there's a couple of different ways that you can approach that. One, you can give them a threaded instrument, like a thread item that is an instrument. They could then weave threads to that instrument to enhance talents like Emotion Song or other troubadour abilities that they are using.
Yeah.
That's one thing they could do. The other is, if you've got a group true pattern, a lot of people aren't overly enamored of the idea of using group true pattern threads to enhance talents.
But that's the one.
But that is another potential source of weaving threads in that way.
Yeah.
To just basically enhance the steps that you are rolling when you are doing that stuff. And then the different songs would just be sort of like role-playing aspects of it, flavor aspects of it, but the actual mechanics would have to interact with the talents or a thread item or something like that.
Gotcha. So he's got questions from each member of the group. So question from himself, the Game Master. My players want to create 3 boxes that have the astral pocket spell woven into them. They want to stash these boxes in different locations in Northwest Barsave, and they want 3 rings made, one for each player so they can each access the boxes. How do I create this as a thread item?
These would have to be probably separate thread items. I don't know off the top of my head. That's something that would be a lot more involved.
Yeah, pretty intricate.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the Astral Pocket spell.
Mm-hmm.
I'd need to take a look at some stuff. My initial thought would actually be to have the ring be the magic item. And one of the things that it can do is cast Astral Pocket onto a thing or whatever, so that the chest or box or whatever that it's attached to is not actually enchanted. It is just the target of a spell that the thread item allows. But there could be other ways of approaching it that I'm not going to try and think out here while we are recording.
Fair enough. This just reminds me of Green Lantern's ring and his lantern that he carries with him in astral space. Just want to preface that right there. Anyway, question from my Sky Raider character, Hagar Stonefinger of Clan Stoneclaw. What known Sky Raider clans live in the Tylon Mountains, the northern stretch of the Dolaris Mountains, and is the entire stretch of the Skull Mountains inhabited by Sky Raiders?
The Dolaris Mountains are the ones that are to the west of the Twilight Peaks, if I'm recalling correctly. Those clans are described in Crystal Raiders, and we talked about them in an earlier episode.
You are correct. Dolaris Mountains are west of the Twilight Peaks.
So there isn't a third one. There are only the 2, I think, is all that are in there. If you want to come up with another one to be there, that's great, but there's nothing officially published about that.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
There was not anything that has been said about any specific Sky Raider clans or troll moots in the Tylon Mountains. Again, doesn't mean that there aren't any. They just have never been mentioned or described in any published material.
Yeah.
And the Skull Mountains are the ones near Iopos and have the Fire Scale moot in them, if I recall correctly. And so, yeah, there's pretty much, if that's the case, then there's pretty much just the one moot. The Fire Scales, any rival moots that would have been there have likely been either eliminated or absorbed by the Fire Scales.
Yeah.
The Skull are in the northwestern corner between Iopos and Bloodwood, right?
Yes.
So the Fire Scale moot is the one there, and based on their description and whatnot, they have either eliminated any other moots or absorbed any, so that it's just the one moot that covers that area.
Exactly. Question from my illusionist character, Reginald Hargreaves Kingsley VI. How would I slow down or stop a curse on the party as an illusionist? You'd probably go.
Illusionist doesn't particularly have. Illusionist doesn't really have a lot of tools for
abating
that.
Curses. Yeah.
Suppress curse is really the talent that you're looking for there. And I know illusionists don't get it in their first 8 circles, and they don't get it in their warden or master tiers either.
Mm-mm.
Illusionists get dispel magic, and that's probably the closest thing that they have, but many curses are probably not susceptible to dispel magic, because as it is, dispel magic, I think by default only targets talents and spells. Like, it doesn't target horror powers or creature powers or anything like that.
Yeah.
There might be knacks in Deeper Secrets that allow it to potentially do more. That would probably be the way that I would look if you weren't going to pick up another discipline, or if you were a human and didn't want to pick up Suppress Curse under versatility, would be to look into knacks and see if there is anything either existing in Deeper Secrets or the companion where some other knacks are listed, but I don't think there are any for Dispel Magic in there. Maybe get a sense of guidance of if there isn't something already of maybe developing a knack that would allow that to happen. I would probably require it to have a decent rank in Dispel Magic to pick that up. Probably 7.
Yeah, I was going to say
maybe
7 or
9 even.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because 9 would put it at the beginning of Warden tier.
Yep.
At that point, you're going like two tiers above where the talent is normally available, because it's a novice tier talent. Maybe going a little bit lower to like 7.
Yeah.
But that's probably the way that I would look if a second discipline or versatility aren't options.
Otherwise, find a weaponsmith and pay him.
Or a wizard. A Nethermancer that's got Suppress Curse. They both have those available.
Yeah.
So I'm saying like a second discipline would be able to give you some additional tools.
Exactly.
To do that. Not that I am like a huge encourager of second disciplines, but it could be that in the course of researching how to do that, it might make sense for them to expand their magical knowledge to go into wizard, for example, to have a greater understanding of the magics that they're trying to manipulate.
Yeah, fair. Nice little story narrative. On to Michael's question. If House Catention sold lots of Decambris adherents into slavery in Thera, I would guess a significant portion of House Decambris would be returned, many times great-grandchildren, of escaped slaves or freed men returned from Theran territory with ancestral grudges in their hearts. Thoughts?
Maybe. I don't recall off the top of my head what specifics are given in the original Serpent River book about the fate of the original House Decambris.
Fair.
I think a lot of them were killed. Certainly the Shivalahala was killed. Even if there were ones that were taken as slaves and shipped off to Thera, I think it all went down before the Scourge anyway, so it is unlikely that after the number of generations that would have gone by, that there would have been sufficient numbers that maintained that cultural narrative to do that. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking off the top of my head, and a lot of that depends on the actual timeline. If they were wiped out effectively before the Scourge, then it's been too long. And if it was after the Scourge, then it's been too recent for that to be a big deal. So,
okay.
I think it's mostly a case that, yes, if there were House Decambris people that were sold into slavery by the Therans and taken elsewhere, I doubt that it is likely that there would be any that still carried that grudge, given the way that slavery typically will break up families and the way that it works.
Yeah.
It's not a bad story hook in one sense. This group of descendants of House Decambris return seeking some kind of justice against Catention or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It's a neat little idea. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure how likely that actually would be.
Fair.
Or you could very easily have them joining and working with the new House Decambris that is sort of more of the company of free captains and so forth, rather than a traditional Shivalahala relationship.
Fair. Michael has a follow-up. It seems to me that wilderness survival should be specific to the type of wilderness that you are in. Somebody who grew up in the backwoods of Appalachia might be great at low mountain forest wilderness, but wouldn't fare any better in Death Valley than your average New York City native would, and vice versa. A Liage jungle villager or veteran could get you across the jungle in one piece, but would probably be at a loss in the Twilight Peaks, and a native of either might struggle to feed the party out on the plains. Maybe we should treat wilderness survival like speak or read or write language. For every rank in it, you get to specify another type of wilderness you can survive in. Thoughts?
No. I don't think that's necessary broadly. If you want to run a game where that level of reality modeling is in play because you are going to be using wilderness survival enough for that to matter, then go for it. I don't think it's something that needs to be set up by default. I'm honestly not even super thrilled with the way that the talents speak language and read and write and read and write language work. That's one of the things that if I could do it again would go back and change. Not the skills, but the talents.
Yeah.
It's a level of, again, to get back to a term from the beginning, of simulationism that just doesn't appeal to me, or that I don't think holds enough value. I don't think it would add enough to the game, generally speaking, to make that worthwhile. Again, I recognize the impulse. I recognize the thought. I just don't think it adds enough to the game in enough situations to make it worthwhile, personally.
Fair. I also know that the wilderness survival table has difficulties for all of those different environs. So yeah, if you don't make your number, you don't know it.
Yeah. I understand where it's coming from. Maybe with the skill, you could do that, but no. I don't see personally the value that it would add to most games. But if it's something that you think would add value to your game because of how much it's being used and the variety of environments that your group is encountering and using it in, great. Then, maybe that kind of, that degree of granularity would be worthwhile. Yeah. I just personally off the top of my head don't see the inherent value in it.
Fair.
There's a reason why we moved away from the melee weapons skill. In second edition, you had to choose like what type of weapons you were skilled in. Unlike the talent, with the skill you had to decide, I'm good with swords, and therefore you couldn't fight with polearms. We got rid of that because, again, that's a level of granularity. It's a degree of detail that I don't see ultimately what it adds to the game. Yeah.
The only other thought I would have is if you want to do that, maybe make each one of them a knack. It's a one-time purchase. Maybe.
But that's what they're talking about, right? Because with read and write language, the idea is, okay, at rank 1, read and write language, you take Throlic.
Yeah.
When you increase read and write language to rank 2, you have a slot that you can learn a second language in.
Yeah. Like
when you go to rank 3, you can pick up a third language that you can read and write in. What they're saying is, okay, I have wilderness survival. When I'm at rank 1, I have picked forests.
Yeah.
When I reach rank 2, I have forests, and then I pick swamps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that as you get more skilled, there are more areas that you get the ability to use wilderness survival in. And I don't see the value of that.
Fair. I agree. It's a little bit too narrowing down or focusing in on, which is okay, because he's going to call me out on something I said a while ago. Also, I think you will find that Dan is mistaken in saying there won't be much of an understory in the jungle because the canopy is so thick. I'm not entirely sure which episode he's referring to, but he says it's 180 jungle environments. I invite him to try to trek overland through the Amazon without a machete and the means to sharpen it several times a day. The plant life at ground level will be thick enough that sight lines should be counted in single-digit yards, and it would not be unrealistic, although granted it would be wildly impractical and tedious, to require a dex roll for every step taken.
Yeah, that's the case in some environments. It's not always, in the jungle, yeah, probably. Yeah. I know it's not the case in, say, a pine barrens,
fair,
for example, because the needles of pine trees mess with the soil so that other plants don't grow.
I have 2 pine trees in my yards. Trust me, I'm right there with you. I know that one quite well.
The ground underneath them, doesn't even grow grass.
No. Pine needles kill everything.
The needles mess with the pH of the soil.
Yep. Kills everything below it.
And so he certainly may have misspoken, but in some environments, it is actually the case that the types of trees that are there will mess with the undergrowth.
Yeah, I've never trekked through the Amazon, so believe me, I'm wrong. I've been married twice. I'm well aware I'm wrong a lot. If you've listened to this podcast for more than 10 episodes, Josh corrects me all the time. I'm wrong a lot. Used to it. Next up, we've got Rasmus. How you doing, Rasmus? Hope everything's all right. Hope all is well with my 2 favorite questers. For some reason, remembered an old post from Josh. See attachment if you want about upcoming product releases. Any word on Arancia, Crinea, or Urupa? We talked about Urupa earlier. With Magic Deeper Secrets and the Grand Bazaar, it would be nice with an update on what products are in the pipeline and where they are. a really general state on how it's going with Earthdawn, and with, also a really general status on how it's going with Earthdawn, with some of the developer team having moved on to other projects.
Yeah, we mentioned Urupa. Urupa is in development. Crayana is actually also in the works. Carl, after some time navigating family stuff and whatnot, is back working on things a little bit more frequently. So he is heading up the Crayana book, although that is still in its earlier stages. I know we still have the manuscript for the Arancia book, or where it was at the last time, but nobody has really picked that up to work on it to any great degree. So it's unclear at this point what exactly is going on with that one.
Fair.
That's kind of where things stand there. We had a developer meeting last night, and we were kind of talking about what our plans are for the next Earthdawn Kickstarter, what we're going to be offering and such. We probably should do a state of the line. I know we didn't do one during FreedoniaCon, during the online con a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've been kind of getting our feet back under us and figuring out where we stand on things and trying to move forward.
Well, yeah, you had 2 Kickstarters to fulfill, and that went awry in a number of ways. So by all means, yeah, it's clearing the slate, getting your feet back underneath you, firmer ground, moving forward. So last email, because, we've only gone long by about an hour. Kidding. Hi, Dan and Josh. This is from Winston. I was writing up an adventure and wanted an opportunity for the scout player to test out their disarm trap talent. The first thing that came to mind was that the quarry would use the first circle shaman spell Alarm at one point on the path to merely alert him to the presence of trackers. I thought it easy enough to simply use the dispel difficulty of the spell as the target number for the disarm trap test itself, but I wasn't sure if the added utility disarm trap gives to awareness would apply to a temporary spell, or what target number to use if it did. May I ask your thoughts on this matter?
Yes, I would allow the disarm trap talent to allow awareness to be used to detect traps. That's kind of the thing on it. Let me look real quickly at the alarm spell.
Well, while you look that up, he follows up with, story-wise, I went with a tripwire that would cause a noisy cascade of rocks to alert nearby entries. Sadly, the scout has been cursed by the mad passion of dice rolling applications, and hijinks ensued.
Yeah, well, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, dice rolling apps are not my friend either. I use one every other week, and it does not like my step 6. Doesn't matter what I'm rolling, but it hates my step 6.
Okay, so Alarm is a first circle spell. It doesn't specify in the spell description what the detection difficulty is or anything like that, but I would treat it as a trap for the purposes of that. That's the learning difficulty. Yeah, the dispel difficulty seems like it is probably a good baseline. The dispel difficulty for a Circle 1 spell is 11. If that feels too easily, then I would go to the using the sensing difficulty, which, while that's normally for illusions, also seems like a good thing that would be, that basically bumps it up to a 16 instead of an 11. Barring any other specific guidance in the spell, the dispel difficulty seems like a good starting point. It could potentially be enhanced by Tenacious Weave or something along those lines. I don't have any other thoughts. That seems as good a thing to select as any, barring any specific guidance.
Fair. That should wrap up this episode here. We covered a lot of ground tonight. Any final thoughts on anything we talked about?
No. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for your
inquiries,
emails, for your questions, for your queries. Thank you for putting up with my 20 minutes of philosophizing and discussion at the beginning of things. I hope that was helpful, and keep it going.
Yeah, and Michael, don't hesitate to point out when I'm wrong, because it happens to me all the time. So if you would like to tell me I'm wrong on something else, by all means, drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, go prove me wrong for your legend.
Good night, everybody.